This video is going to be based on swords and what are the best swords to run for total damage and damage against bosses and damage against champions, things like that. This isn't based for swords that give you increased movement like Eager Edge and stuff like that, so I'm not testing any of that stuff. It's more for damage. So there are different types of sword frames, so just take you through the different frames. There's caster frame, which has a ranged heavy attack. That's what separates it. Then you've got adaptive frame, which has a heavy uppercut attack. Then you've got vortex frame, which has a spin attack as the heavy. Then you have Titan, which is the Titan sword aggressive frame, which is exclusive for the Titan, of course. And then there's a Hunter exclusive sword, which is lightweight, which has its own unique heavy attack and stuff. So those are the different types of sword frames. I'll test some exotics at the end to see how they compare to the legendary counterparts. But this video, I want to focus on perks. And just a handful of them, not all of them, because there's so many. There's counter-attack, flash counter, end guard, stuff like surrounded. I don't want to test all that stuff because all that stuff I already know doesn't proc enough of the time. The perks I'm going to mention to you has like a 90% uptime. Some of them are 100% uptime. Just depends. So it's tests that are more easier to use. So like Vorpal weapon, Whirlwind blade, those two. Frenzy, we'll test that one. And then One for All. One for All is decent, but Quickfang used to roll with Whirlwind blade. It doesn't. The new version doesn't. The old one did. So we'll have a look at One for All as well, but specifically to that sword. And then then after the end of all that, to establish what the best perk is, then have a look at maybe an adaptive frame sword, see how well that does, as opposed to other types of frames. So to make this test as clean as possible, first off I'll use the raid boss from Dreaming City, Cali, because when you wipe you get damage numbers, so let the game tell you what the damage numbers are rather than me telling you what it is. This test isn't exact, it's a educated guess, and the test isn't perfect to the actual T, right? So it's good enough as it is. So what we'll first is test Vorpal weapon versus Whirlwind blade, which we have one sword to do that to make this test as clean as possible on Temptation's Hook. So even though, yeah, I've got a bad guard on here, but I've got Jagged Edge, the test is clean because it's the same sword, so you'll see the difference between the two. So that's a good sword to test with. Then we'll use Solar Scar and use a Frenzy version, and then use a Vorpal weapon version. See what's better out of those two. And then, as I said, we'll use Adaptive Frame, which I've got a Whirlwind one there. The Hunter Quickfang, the Titan aggressive frame, and then see how these two compare to the rest of the swords. So the first test we'll do is try to establish which perk is better, Vorpal weapon or Whirlwind blade. So these first two clips will be Temptation's Hook, the exact same sword, the exact same roll, because I've got dual wielding perks on each. This is Vorpal weapon. Notice Vorpal weapon didn't even kick in straight away, so we're going to lose damage because of that. We'll just use our heavy attack every time we have our recharge rate. This is same for each test. We're not using Loosened Blade, Bubble, Well of Radiance, no buffs, no debuffs, nothing. It's just raw damage for each sword, no specs in. So that's your Vorpal weapon, Temptation's Hook. So let's say we'll get 303k. So 303k damage for the Vorpal Temptation's Hook. So we'll see how that compares to newly nerfed Whirlwind blade, which now stacks up to 10 times. Used to stack up to 5. Vorpal weapon also got a nerf from 20% to 10%. So they've both had a nerf, but we'll just see how this works. So we got our times 10, then we do a heavy attack, and then now we're good for the rest of the damage phase because we now have Whirlwind blade times 10. Takes longer to stack up, but let's just see if that even matters. Which I have a theory that it doesn't. I have a theory that probably Whirlwind blade is the best damage dealing perk, most versatile one at least. So you're just showing you same Temptation's Hook, same stats. We got 377k, so that's around about 20% damage bonus on top of Vorpal. So it just established straight away Whirlwind blade is a better perk than Vorpal for swords. Now we're going to test Frenzy versus Vorpal. So we've established Whirlwind blade's number 1 out of these. So now we'll see what's number 2. Is Frenzy better than Vorpal or is Vorpal better than Frenzy? So notice I had Frenzy proc the entire time. This is on Solar Scar. This is also a caster frame sword. To make it fair, we'll make it we'll test Vorpal on the same sword. Well, the same sword, the rules slightly different, so bear in mind there might be different some variables there, but we're talking minor percentages. So now we get 355, right, which is more than a Vorpal Temptations hook at least. So the Frenzy Sword done fine. It done alright, right? Not as good as the Whirlwind, notice, but it's close too. So now we'll do the Vorpal, but this is on Solar Scar this time. Notice again, Vorpal didn't proc straight away. I don't know why. Maybe it is. Maybe it's just taking time to kick in. We'll just do the exact same test and see how sort of very similar Vorpal and Frenzy is. Because Vorpal procs immediately, well, meant to, on mages and bosses, yellow bars and everything apart from red bars. Frenzy takes that time to kick in. That's the only downside. 348. So they're very similar. Frenzy, Vorpal, they're so similar, it doesn't matter in the grand scheme of things. So now we're going to try Fallen Guillotine, the God Roll. So this is Swordmaster's Guard, Jagged Edge, Relentless Strikes, Whirlwind Blade. Let's see how good it is, because they nerfed this archetype. They nerfed the amount of ammo it uses and things. Right? But let's just see how this sword compares to what we've had so far. Which so far, the highest damage roll is 377 on a caster frame Temptations hook. Let's see how good it is compared to that. We just ran out of ammo at the end as well, so that damage was pretty perfect. Let's see how close it is. So we get 490k, so it's far more damage than the other swords. Obviously they're caster frames. So now we've established, obviously, vortex frame swords are still amazing. Whirlwind Blade is still amazing. Obviously Relentless Strikes will extend your damage as well, which is kind of needed on that sword because of how much damage, because of how much ammo it consumes. So now this is just going to be a regular adaptive frame sword, but with Whirlwind Blade, Relentless Strikes, Jagged Edge, and Swordmaster's Guard. Let's see how that compares to Fallen Guillotine. Because these adaptive frame swords are your general swords, they have the uppercut, right? It's sort of different to what the vortex frame is, but let's see how good it is for damage. The sword ammo goes further, notice. So it'll have a sort of higher total damage, this type of sword. So just showing you it's a negative space, which is, it used to be a prophecy weapon. So 447. So that's higher than anything else we've had apart from Fallen Guillotine. So it just shows you adaptive frame swords are decent and they're good for ammo. That's the pro to them. So now we're going to use the Crown Splitter, the Titan sword. This is also a God Roll. Relentless Strikes, Whirlwind Blade. Let's see how it compares to both negative space, which is adaptive, and then Fallen Guillotine. Now it's noticeable because of Whirlwind Blade and the heavy recharge rate. Obviously I'm not using Loosened Blade, so Loosened Blade would really benefit Crown Splitter, but I'm not allowed to use it because I didn't use it on any other swords. So I feel as though this sword got the biggest nerf because of our Whirlwind stacks so slow. This sword is already slow, 412k, so it's less than adaptive frame. The damage phase might not have been perfect, but just shows you Crown Splitter isn't as good as likes of your Fallen Guillotine. I don't think it is, at least not now. It used to be. So we got one for all the proc. You notice this is the Hunter lightweight sword. Now I'm going to repeat this twice. I am not using the in-air Hunter sword trick. I'll repeat it again. I am not using the in-air sword trick on Hunter. I'm just using it as it's meant to be used. Right? So I'm not doing any tricks. So if you do the trick, your damage number will be far higher, and it'll actually end up being probably the highest sword damage number you can get in the game, I think. But I'm not doing it. I'm just not doing it. I'm just doing the general. This is Relentless Strikes, one for all. See how it compares. 424k. So it's decent damage, but as I said, you can make that higher. So it's a good sword. It's just it doesn't come with Whirlwind Blade. Whirlwind Blade would really make it a bit of a better sword. 'Cause one for all isn't all that great. It's alright. This is now Lament. So let's just see how Lament compares. So we've got 490k to beat. That's the highest on Fallen Guillotine. Now I'll repeat this twice. I'm doing light, heavy for the charged Lament attacks. right? That's the combo I'm doing, which is meant to be the highest now. And let's just see how that compares. Obviously, Lament has added benefits. It gives you health regen, it's good on champions because it's got barrier in it. So there's more to consider than just its raw damage. 404, so at least it's breached 400k. Not as good as a Fallen Guillotine for like on a boss fight, but it's still decent. So this is Black Talon in the end. So you can do 3 heavy attacks with a full recharge rate. Then you do your light swings and you do 3 heavy attacks. So we'll see how it compares. This sword is good because it's ranged, but would I rather run a Solar Scar than this? Probably. So Black Talon's kind of lacking. It's good, but I'd rather run a Caster Frame Legendary Sword, free up my exotic slot and run something else, because you'll see the damage number in the end. It's nothing to be sort of looked upon as good. That was just an overall test on all these swords. It's just a guesstimate, it's not actual figures, it's just for visual check. Hope you enjoy, thank you.